Rising from the plains are these massive buttes, and intermingled between these buttes are short grass prairie and ponderosa pine woodlands and mountain mahogany shrubland. And once you see this landscape, everything just hits you. And then on top of these massive buttes, there's a species out here that you normally wouldn't get to see in Nebraska. Bighorn sheep were native to Nebraska. Once settlers came west, they were completely wiped out, but they have come back and are now a part of this landscape. It would be very disappointing to see them out of this landscape again. The Wildcat Hills would have another hole in its heart. My name is Grant Reiner. For my undergrad, I studied fisheries and wildlife, and for my master's degree, I got a Master's of Applied Science with an emphasis in science communication. My graduate project was 2 years long, and I had to decide where I wanted to complete the project, so I chose the Wildcat Hills. The Wildcat Hills start at the Wyoming border and span across Nebraska for 55 miles. And for those 2 years, I placed camera traps out on the landscape. I've captured everything from pack rats to mountain lions. Songbirds, birds of prey, turkey vultures, bobcats, mule deer, fox, coyotes. I mean, there's just so much out here. And the camera traps have also captured bighorn sheep. Mike Forsberg was the one who taught me all about camera trapping.
What did we get this time?
2 coyotes, 2 lions, bighorn sheep, and turkeys.
Not a bad day.
Not a bad day.
I've used camera traps of various kinds out here in the Wildcat Hills for, maybe back in 2011.
Anytime something crosses that trigger, trips that trigger, it sends a signal to the camera. The camera takes a picture. The camera takes a picture, and the flashes are tied to the camera, so the flashes go off when the camera goes off. And hopefully you get something really cool in the frame.
These are real rugged landscapes, and there's a lot of wildlife, but a lot of times you don't see it. So being able to put some cameras out there that are there watching and recording when you're not is a really important tool to tell the story of life out here in the high plains. So with these camera traps being out for the last couple years, they've captured a lot of bighorn sheep behavior. When you hear the word Nebraska and you hear the word bighorn sheep, you don't think those two go together.
They are these tremendous athletes that can scale these walls that you would never dream of going up or down.
Bighorn sheep were creatures of the plains, just like a lot of other species that you only think of in the mountains today. A grizzly bear were here. Mountain lions were here, elk were here. Fortunately, some of these species are starting to come back, and it's because of the conservation efforts that have taken place by a large community of people in this part of the state.
Behind us, there's a sheep going across. I gotta look, sorry. I don't have my I can just see the butt. I don't have my glasses on, but That's a small ram, young ram, so how cool is that? I'm Todd Nordine with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission and the Big Game Disease and Research Program Manager. The primary loss of sheep in this region was due to unregulated hunting, habitat loss, and disease. Those are the three factors that really caused the downfall of bighorn sheep out here in the western part of the state and throughout the country for that matter. The first reintroductions back to the state started back in 1981. The sheep that we've got now, have come from various parts of the country, Custer State Park and Pikes Peak area at Colorado Springs.
3, 2, 1, go. It's down, come on up.
And we've been up to the Missouri Breaks of Montana. We've also been to the province of Alberta.
Okay.
And that's all the places that they've come from, so quite the diversity.
That's a nice ram there. Yeah, she's a beauty. Yeah. Here comes the ram, boys.
The reason we were doing this, first of all, is we did a habitat suitability study, and it indicated that we still have good to excellent habitat in the Wildcat Hills.
Pull the gray trailer door back farther. Thank you.
Bighorn sheep, like many species, were close to extinction. And as we talked earlier, we're extirpated from the state. But all species play an important role in the ecosystem, and science has determined that. We felt it was important to try to bring them back to this landscape after nearly a 100-year absence. We've had a lot of interest in bringing sheep back from the public, but also landowners. A lot of these efforts have gone on across the country to bring them back, and so we've been a part of that and felt it's really important to do so.
My name is Emily Moberg, and I am a graduate research assistant at South Dakota State University. We are in Williams Gap in the Wildcat Hills, and we're just doing our bighorn sheep captures.
This is 15351 and 15513.
Go, go, go!
Cool.
Every February since 2017, we've been doing our annual disease surveillance. Right off the bat, we take off the old collar so that we can get to their jugular to draw some blood. We also collect DNA. We'll ear tag it if they need a new ear tag. We ultrasound them to see if they're pregnant. And if they are pregnant, we insert a little tiny transmitter inside their birth canal, which will come out and tell us when there was a birth event. And then for our disease surveillance, we take about 6 nasal swabs. Since 2015, we've had a pneumonia die-off where up to 60% of our sheep were lost. This is a huge issue all across Western America. Anybody that has a sheep population is seeing effects of pneumonia, so nobody really knows how to best and most effectively treat this disease. Everything that we're doing is just trying to help increase numbers so that we can get to a healthy, viable population. So lambing's a lot like chess. You have to be really calculated in your capture. You can't just run at it because even at 12 hours old, they can outrun us.
Okay, I see it, Emily. Yep, okay. It's right tucked under this rock here, right here. Right, I'm gonna put the net down.
Time is 9:42, 45 seconds.
Our goal is always to handle it in 4 minutes or less and just get out of there and leave as little scent as possible.
Another male.
So we put them in the bag. That kind of calms them down. So then we weigh it once they're in that bag.
5.2.
Okay, 151,280. Once that's done, we put a collar on it. And then we collect nasal swabs, see if that little baby has bacteria that is associated with the pneumonia. That's it. After that's all good and done, we try to release it right back where we caught it and just get out of there as quickly as we can.
9:44, 50 seconds.
So far, out here in the Wildcat Hills, this reintroduction of the bighorn sheep has been a big success. They're back on this landscape, their populations are increasing, largely in part because of such a huge community of conservationists, landowners, professionals, researchers that have come together for one goal, which is to make sure that these bighorn sheep survive out here in the Wildcat Hills.
In Nebraska, wildlife biologists that are in charge of these native species that they're trying to reintroduce back into the wild are really amazing people. Their connections with these animals run really, really deep. Their hearts are about like this big, you know, and that's what it takes. That's what conservation takes out here in the plains today.
When I was young, the top 25 television shows were Westerns. One of the great injurious myths of this culture, and it has been for the last 500 years, is that of the rugged individual. There is absolutely no such thing anywhere on planet Earth as a rugged individual. It simply does not exist. Life thrives because of interrelatedness, interconnectedness from diversity. If you end up self-contained, you're going to be a fairly miserable human being. In 1987, we moved up to Red Lodge on the northeast corner of Yellowstone, and one of the first things I did was to shoulder a pack and do a 500-mile walk around Yellowstone just to start to begin to understand some of the dynamics of a system that full of potential. I started to really pay attention to what the tracks were that nature leaves in us. And so Yellowstone became the canvas on which I could paint those musings about what is happening to me and what's happening to the other people I know who spend time in an ecosystem this wild and this rich. What does it give them? After my first wife and I were in a tragic canoeing accident in Ontario, and she died from that accident in 2005, the way nature helped me through grief, and there are many ways, the beauty of nature draws us onto the stage but then moves us to the side. So it's not just the spotlight on me and poor me and I'm suffering this loss. That's all true, but I'm off to the side of the stage. I'm enamored of the beauty of the natural world. I feel a part of it, but it's not the Gary show. And that's a very, very helpful perspective, even in the depths of grief. The other two qualities that I've written a lot about are mystery. There are some things you just can't fathom, and the death and loss of a loved one is right up there with the worst of those times. And the last trait I would say is community. What I see when I look into the eyes of a wild animal, there is a kinship, a sense of belonging with the other beings. Here is both something I can never know, and at the same time, here is kin. And I know that to a large extent, I'm here because of that web of life. And so I always take great comfort in that sense of belonging.
To be a good bear researcher is, to spend a lot of time on the field. Also a lot of time reading some papers, manuscripts about the bears, meeting a lot of people who are also have a similar interest, you know. Spending most of your time on bears. And then year by year, you know more. All in all, it's just you need to be persistent. My name is Slaven Reljic. I'm dealing with large carnivores in Croatia and the surrounding countries. I'm in this work from like 2009, so more than 10 years. Somehow I got hooked for the large carnivores and for the bears especially, and that love stayed until today. Yeah. Bears and people in Croatia. Through history, there was always like interaction between bears and the humans. There are conflicts with the locals, especially with the shepherds who have sheep and beehive owners. But there is a compensation system for the bear damages. Local hunting right owners, they are obliged to compensate the damage because they are managing the game, and the brown bear is a game species in Croatia. The main threats for bear in Croatia and this region is actually building infrastructures. Recently it's very, very actual to build wind farms on the top of the hills. It's tricky to know the real effect of these wind farms. For example, for the wolves is known the period of 6-7 years they don't actually use this region where is the wind farm. And for the bears, it's still not known, but could be the same. There is poaching of bears to some extent. Just recently we find out that one of our bears was poached. I think even by the hunters, with which we have a quite good collaboration throughout the years, but yeah, they just did it. You can study many things in the life of a bear. So the best thing is to catch the bear and put the collar on the bear, which is of course not really easy job to do with the bears. But you can get really insight in their daily activity. For example, if they're sleeping, if they're walking, running, how they interact with the human infrastructure, for example, some settlements, how big is their home ranges. Also, when you have bear in hands, you want to take some other samples that you can investigate. For example, we are taking the blood, nasal swabs to see if there is maybe traces of coronavirus there. Also taking the body measurements to see some average size of the bears here. And yeah, you try to find out as much as you can. Here, like a year and a half ago, we adopted one little dog. His name is Piki. He's a really funny dog, actually. He is old dog, like he was 13 when we adopted him. Now he's 14. And we are taking him on all our field work, and he's kind of enjoying it, actually. He likes to drive in the car on the forest, you know. He even have some photos with some of the captured bears, you know. Yeah, not many dogs can say. The future of bears, I think they have a good future here, actually. Just after the Second World War, which is about 60 years ago, they were quite in the low numbers here, like 50 to 80, which is quite low. Nowadays it's approximately 1,000 bear, probably even more. Nowadays people want to preserve the bear somehow. They are aware of their ecological, function in the nature, and they just want to have them in the forest. All in all, I think the bears have a good future here. Yeah, I think it's going in the good direction.
Every spring, in freshwater creeks, streams, and rivers in eastern and central North America, little known but dazzling feats of architecture and endurance take place. This architectural feat is the construction of a gravel nest by a rock star, a male minnow who uses his jaws to collect and transport stones to construct a nest for spawning. This marvelous undertaking is accompanied by a mesmerizing assemblage of fishes that burst forth with a symphony of color to celebrate the rites of spring and produce the next generation. Constructing a stone nest with the mouth is unique. Of more than 34,000 fish species on Earth, males of only 13 species build stone nests, and they live exclusively in North America. One of these nest builders is the bluehead chub. Like other gravel nest builders, he is a convener of community, vis-a-vis, when I build it, they will come. From the time a male bluehead chub begins nest construction, brilliantly colored minnows called nest associates congregate over the nest. Nest associates, however, do not contribute to the construction of a nest. They are there to spawn, and when chance allows, to eat eggs. But the nest-building chub, however, is selfish. He has an ulterior motive in allowing nest associates to crowd over his nest and spawn. Not a conscious intention, but an evolutionary one derived from natural selection. It's a safety in numbers ploy. The more fishes surrounding you, the less likely you will be eaten by a predator. But this may not be his only selfish motive. Masses of eggs spawned by nest associates in a nest reduce predation on bluehead chub eggs, a hypothesis we are now testing. For example, a single nest may contain about 2,500 eggs, but less than 400 of these, about 15%, are eggs of the bluehead chub. Nest building is quite a test of endurance for a minnow, typically only 6 to 8 inches long. On average, nest construction takes about 4 days, but can continue for over a week. Small nests are about 2 feet in diameter, contain about 8,000 stones, and weigh about 70 pounds. In contrast, large nests are over 6 feet long, contain up to 20,000 stones, and weigh over 200 pounds. Imagine, this is like building a small home in 4 days, moving the equivalent of 60 tons of building materials without heavy equipment. Nest associates, which are constantly crowding a nest, do not impede the bluehead chub's activities. The male prepares a spawning pit, which he excavates and reshapes with his mouth and periodically fans with his anal fin. He spawns there with one female at a time. The act of spawning occurs within a split second. It is initiated by the female aside the male in the pit. She launches vertically, which prompts the male to wrap his body tightly in a semicircle around her, the spawning clasp. Eggs and sperm are released during the clasp and sink into the rocks of the nest. Other male bluehead chubs can create spawning pits on a nest. The builder of the nest and later established males engage these intruding males in non-lethal combats like headbutting, parallel swims, and circle swims. In the circle swim, 2 males whirl in a tight circle head to tail to establish territory. All 13 nest-building species are crucial to freshwater ecosystems. Their nests provide clean spawning substrates to approximately 40 other minnow species. In this sense, nest builders are keystone species. That is, other species are dependent upon them. Remove a keystone species and its ecosystem will collapse, including the food web which supports game fishes like bass and trout. By protecting creeks, streams, and rivers from human impacts, such as habitat destruction, pollution, and pesticide and fertilizer runoff, we can safeguard these vital ecosystems. The next time you encounter a stream, look carefully through the water's surface, and you may just discover these nest-building rock stars and their colorful entourage. The experience may just change how you value the natural world around you.
The gorge is deep and unforgiving. It demands a constant fight against gravity from all who live here. All except one, the kestrel. But this one's just a fledgling, one of 4 siblings that still have much to learn. Right now, their concern is food, and they're in luck. A parent is bringing them a vole. Only the quickest will get it. For a few moments there is chaos. But soon the winner claims the prize. The young kestrel takes the kill to a quiet ledge. But even while it's still deciding what is food and what isn't, its siblings are growing restless again. This time, however, it's not food that they're after, but rather company. Kestrels can have fun on their own, but they love to be together and play together. Raptors are deadly predators, but in the wild there is also room for happiness. These are curious animals, always watching and learning. Yet some matters must always take priority. Such as freshly caught voles. Spring is a blissful time in the gorge. Territories are established, and the allure of freedom beckons young birds to leave their nests, never to return. The hour draws near when the young kestrels must also fly away from the ancient cliff face and soar above the chasm. But there is one last lesson left. They may have conquered gliding flight, but to survive, these young kestrels must learn the skill that will set them apart from all other birds. The art of hovering. Of floating gently in the breeze. When the conditions are just right, a strong updraft forms by the eastern wall. The narrow ravine creates the perfect balance of wind, pressure, and lift to allow them not only to defy gravity, but to become weightless. Dusk settles in the gorge. Above, the young kestrels play in the fading light. They are finally ready to face whatever the future holds for them. Up here, the boundaries between friends and rivals, predators and prey, are not so clear. Mastering the wind will take a lifetime. But among all the uncertainties, one constant will always remain. The joyful, endless path of becoming weightless.
It seems like everyone is talking about bees. It might be because there are 2.8 million honeybee hives in the US alone. With 20 to 60,000 bees per hive, that's more than 50 billion honeybees flying around our farms and neighborhoods every summer. The honeybee is the closest thing there is to a domesticated insect. We take care of them so that they can take care of us by helping many of our crops reproduce. But honeybees aren't the only bees in town. In fact, it's a little strange that they're here at all. Settlers from England brought the first honeybees to North America in 1622. But those European honeybees arrived to a continent that was already teeming with wild bees. More than 4,000 species of them. Yeah, there are 4,000 species of wild native bees living here in North America. Some of those wild bee species are bumblebees. They're probably our most famous wild bees, and they have a lot in common with honeybees. They're often striped with yellow and black, and they live in colonies that can be active all summer long. But most wild bees are pretty different. Many of them are solitary, meaning that they live their lives alone. In these species, each female is a hard-working single mom who builds her own nest, usually in a wood tunnel or underground burrow, lays her own eggs, and works alone to gather nectar and pollen to feed her babies. Some of these solitary bees only live a few weeks as adults. Wild bees come in just about every size, shape, and color you can imagine. Some are big, some are tiny, some are fuzzy, some are shiny. They can be yellow, orange, red, green, black, even blue. More than 80% of all plant species rely on animals to move their pollen from flower to flower. This process, called pollination, is how these plants reproduce. All kinds of animals play a role in pollination. Butterflies, moths, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, even birds and bats. But bees are the best pollinators out there. And while honeybees get most of the attention, wild bees can be just as effective, oftentimes even more so. Bumblebees, for instance, can use their wing muscles to vibrate their bodies and release the pollen from certain kinds of flowers, a trick we call buzz pollination. And unlike honeybees, which pollinate lots of different plants, many wild bees only visit a few flower species, or even just one, like the death camas mining bee, the only bee that can eat the toxic pollen of the death camas flower. Some of these relationships have developed over millions of years, and the survival of each partner depends on the other. For plants, pollination can be just as important as water and sunlight. It's pollination that ensures that plants can produce enough fruits and seeds to feed all the animals that eat them, with enough left over to make the next generation of plants. And plants don't just feed animals and people. They provide habitat for other creatures. They help maintain healthy soil and water, and even produce the oxygen that we breathe. So a healthy community of pollinators is part of a healthy planet. Unfortunately, bee populations around the world are dwindling because of human impacts. In 2017, the rusty-patched bumblebee became the first North American bee species to be listed as an endangered species in the US. And it's not alone. By one estimate, about half of our wild bee species may be declining, and about half of those could be at risk of extinction. Now here's the good news. We can all do something about it right where we live. Wild bees need places to nest, and they don't ask for much. For many species, a woodpile or a patch of loose soil could be just what they're looking for. And don't worry. While most wild bees can sting if you bother them, they're really pretty friendly. Wild bees also need to stay healthy, so try to avoid using insecticides and other harmful chemicals like weed killers in places that wild bees frequent. And of course, wild bees need food. If you have a yard, a community garden, a rooftop, or even a window box, you can grow flowering plants native to your area. Plant even 1 square foot of wildflowers, and I promise you, bees will find them and appreciate them. And finally, share the good news. Once you start attracting bees, tell everyone about your bee sanctuary. Bees need all the friends they can get, and each one of us can make a difference.
Just beyond the southern coast of Iceland, hidden amongst the cliffs, a remote fishing town, Heimaey, is home to the world's largest puffin colony. Returning every summer to breed, they are warmly welcomed, with the puffins being an important part of their community and tradition. But the island is changing. Once covered in puffins every summer, it has become a scarce landscape in comparison. With the puffins forced to adapt, can the town of Heimaey do enough to save these age-old inhabitants? Is this a sign of a much bigger issue? Can anything be done to save the brothers of the North? Atlantic puffins lay only a single egg each breeding season, giving them one chance to successfully raise their chick or puffling. These parents devote every day flying out to sea in search for food, whilst their pufflings wait patiently. However, the ocean temperatures are rising, causing the main source of prey, the sand eel, to disappear. Desperate, the puffins are forced to abandon their nests, leaving eggs that will never hatch and chicks who will be left to starve. Dr. Erpur Hansson has been studying the puffin population since 2007 and has experienced firsthand how the loss of prey has affected the colonies.
Maybe the weirdest moment was in Papey in 2011. We came there and all the pufflings died within a span of a few days. They come out of the burrows when they start, and they were so emancipated that the gulls didn't even eat them. There was nothing left on them. But it was really eerie. It was like 130,000 plus all over, and the air was just sweet from death smell, from rotting carcasses. They were completely taken by surprise there, and everything died.
The town witnessed the puffins vanish year by year. And for the few surviving pufflings, a new threat was just beyond the cliffs. It takes place in the dead of night, when pufflings fled their nests to avoid predators. The blinding lights of town disorientate the chicks, with many of them landing in the harbor or crashing into town, unable to make their way home to the open ocean.
We have been looking for pufflings just since we were like kids, and our parents have been looking for them since they were kids, and our grandparents have been going on for generations and generations. So it's just like it's a tradition here on the island.
You got it!
Every year, the children of Heimaey rescue stranded pufflings, bringing hope amongst the people and saving over 4,000 pufflings from the lights. Dr. Hansen's team have utilized this tradition by weighing every rescued puffling, as being a healthy weight is vital for getting through the first winter. Unfortunately, due to the loss of food, their odds of surviving the Atlantic are slim. Whilst this tradition is fighting to save the puffins, another has thrown their hard work into question. In a few short years, the same puffins that were saved will fall victim to another age-old tradition, puffin hunting.
The families had to do it to get food for the families for the winter. So they would go out and stay for a month hunting. And the old guys like my great-grandfather, they used to have their own spots on the island where nobody other could hunt. They owned that spot. This was their way to make food for the family. And over the years, of course, it changed. But we still have that tradition, how we hunt and how we do it. It's done the right way because it's been taught the right way for hundreds of years.
For the island's first inhabitants, puffin hunting was a way of survival. Now, their descendants keep the tradition alive as a way to stay connected to nature and their cultural heritage. Preventing the puffin's extinction would be crucial in keeping their tradition, and so worked alongside Dr. Hansen to reduce the number of puffins hunted.
We were two of us, we could easily cut 200, 300. And we got 70 because we said 70 is enough. We don't need any more. If something is not doing well to get youngsters up or the next generation of birds, and everybody should stop. And we did that, and we're still doing that with only 9 days. But if everything goes back to normal, I don't see why you should not be allowed to go the way it was. Because my dad is 56 years old. My grandfather is 76 years old. There's a gap between my generation and then there's nothing coming behind me. So I think the next, if everything goes back to normal, it's going to be my son's generation who get taught how to hunt, and they're going to be good hunters. But in between, we kind of have a gap because of the restrictions for the past 13 years.
Over time, puffin hunting has been declining from killing over 250,000 puffins a year to now only up to 30,000 across all of Iceland. But there is still some concern of the hunt's contributing factors to the puffin population.
Every single puffin caught during population decline is an addition to the decline. So by definition, all hunting during declines are not sustainable. Now, if the hunting of 20,000 or between 20 and 30,000, which it is now, is going to make do a break? No, it isn't. It's not big enough to really be of a key issue when you have much larger numbers happening naturally. No, it's not really the big factor, but it's probably the most emotional one.
For 130 years, puffin hunters have kept a record of their seabird harvest. These records have been used to help Dr. Hansen discover patterns behind the puffin's demise. This year was the puffins' most successful breeding season in over 15 years, but their future is still an uncertain one. With rising ocean temperatures, puffin colonies are disappearing all around the world. The island's traditions have sealed a deep bond between the people and nature, and Heimaey's dedicated efforts are a vital lifeline, giving hope for the future of Iceland's iconic puffins.
Hey friends, I was just reading this new book, Native Bees of Wyoming, a field guide. I love these little guys. These are my little dudes. I love them. This past spring, I put in my first ever pollinator garden and got to see all these different bees and butterflies and moths all summer long. It got me curious, where do these guys go in the wintertime? Well, I learned that there's actually 3 main strategies that bees and other pollinators use to overwinter or hibernate. There's diggers, stemmers, and duffers. So we're still learning, but some estimates say that there's 700 to 800 different species of native bees in Wyoming.
Wow.
Some of them, like sweat bees and miner bees, are diggers. They bury into the ground or sometimes find abandoned rodent burrows put there by mice or squirrels to make it through the winter. Other species are stemmers. Moths and butterflies attach their overwintering homes, cocoons, or chrysalises to the stems or leaves of standing plants like this. We also have other species like small carpenter bees that will nest overwinter in these hollow stems on cool plants like this sawtooth groundsel. Our last group of pollinator hibernators are duffers. Duffers are species like swallowtail butterflies or the super cool white-lined sphinx moth. They make their winter homes down in the duff. Duff is just the old leaves, stems, and grasses that rest down at the soil surface. So, now that we learned the strategies that our pollinator hibernator friends use to make it through the winter, here's some tips that you can do to help these little guys out and create some awesome micro habitat. Tip 1. Heavy mulch can make it hard for diggers to emerge in the springtime. If you want to dress out your garden beds, use a light compost or shredded leaves. Tip 2. For the stemmers, leave those stems standing. Let them overwinter and only cut them back in the late spring. If you just can't wait, consider making a pile of stems that you put in an out-of-the-way part of the yard. Tip 3. For the duffers, let those leaves lie. Instead of sending leaves to the landfill, consider leaving areas of your yard unraked or putting piles in areas off to the side. Those birds, bees, and little butterflies will thank you. And one last bonus tip. If you're the sort of person who likes a clean, tidy yard, or your homeowners association just requires it, consider the mullet approach. Business in the front, party in the back. Cut that front yard, but maybe leave some more wild natural areas in the backyard. Cut the stems in the front of the bed, but leave the long ones in the back of the bed. Thanks for following along as we covered some great ways to foster good microhabitat on your property. Until next time, Stay curious.
I picked up a bird guide in high school, and I was just astounded that there were all these different kinds of birds that were just right around me that I had no idea about. This is my 10th year on Maui. I came here to work with these birds. We know there are fewer than 200 kiwikiu left in the world. This is an ongoing extinction event. When you're working with birds that are on the verge of extinction, you'd almost be excused for being a bummer all the time. They're almost like mythic. Oh, it's gotta be a banana right there. Erica is pretty tenacious. And she's got a really good attitude. It's a special thing to have a new person to help save these birds from extinction.
Some people are good organizers or good educators. What I can do is work in these forests to prevent this extinction.
It's hard for people to feel passionate about saving something that they don't have a personal experience with. I mean, many people don't know that these birds even exist, so why care if they go extinct?
Honey creepers are unique in the forest. They have that really iconic curved bill. Honey creepers co-evolved with different plants. Plant will have a perfect curved flower that fits.
Honey creepers pollinate native plants. That's their job in the forest. Without pollinators, these plants can't reproduce.
Of the 6 honey creepers that are on Maui, the kiwikiu and the akohekohe are critically endangered.
These birds are only found here on this island. Just like a Jenga stack, you remove one, stack stays up. And in fact, you can remove quite a few, but at some point, if you remove enough, it'll all come tumbling down. That's sort of my nightmare.
These birds used to be found from the mountains to the sea. Their ranges have constricted through habitat loss. Because they're so rare, I always think of them as kind of like jewels of the rainforest.
The only way that we can get to them is by helicopter. That makes it challenging.
The critically endangered birds, they are in really remote rainforests. The goal is to protect these forest birds so that they'll be around for future generations to experience. Can't do much to save a bird if you don't know where it is. The song meters help us record audio to monitor for the forest birds. As a native Hawaiian, I feel we would be much poorer for the loss of these birds. We could be documenting basically their last words. There's this thing called the Kumulipo, and it's kind of the Hawaiian Genesis. Basically, it's like the creation. And in it, it states everything is interconnected and related. Kind of funny that something as small as a mosquito could cause such huge devastation.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming. I'm Chris Moran. I'm the forest bird coordinator at Haleakala National Park. So what's the story with mosquitoes and malaria? Mosquitoes and avian malaria are moving into higher elevation habitats and killing native forest birds. I have seen it personally, and it's pretty crushing. We're talking like 9 days after a bite, you can see 90 to 95% mortality. Avian malaria is a deadly disease.
Mosquitoes carry avian malaria. It is basically a kiss of death.
As soon as the native birds disappeared from the lower elevations where people were, they were out of sight, out of mind. And there were even these clubs devoted to finding birds from elsewhere in the world and introducing them to Hawaii because people found it so odd that there weren't birds here. Honeycreepers are such an integral part of Maui, the heart of Maui. Controlling mosquitoes is the only hope. Yeah, I mean, who likes mosquitoes? If we can succeed over time, we can say, oh my goodness, look, the birds are down at 5,000 feet. Now they're at 4,500 feet. I think we can fix this. Even if you're a really good birder, you need experience with the bird to be good at finding them. There's really not that many people to develop that skill. She's got it now. If she came back and said I didn't hear any, I would say, oh, I believe you.
Now that I formed really strong connections with these birds, I can't even picture a world without them. There's an urgency to the things that need to be done. If we lose the birds, we are losing a piece of Hawaii.
The beautiful blue Danube flows through the heart of Vienna, and with the gentle kiss of spring, pastel petals blossom and life flourishes. And it is here where there is a remarkable secret. This is the home of the beaver. Enjoying a peaceful moment on the river is a male beaver, soaking up the last rays of the afternoon sun. he must frequently groom his fur in order to keep it waterproof. He diligently removes debris and coats his fur in oil, which he self-produces where the sun doesn't shine. Not every beaver builds a lodge here in Vienna. Instead, this resourceful beaver has created a home in an unexpected place. And it is here where he is raising a family, right under our feet. European beavers mate for life, and the marital bliss of this couple is reflected in the 5 kits and yearlings that they are raising. Now you know why he needed his moment of peace. Once the sun sets, the beavers take over, and the river becomes their playground. As the Danube's water level rapidly rises and falls, the beavers have no need for dams here, leaving more time for self-care. And one of the adolescent beavers has found the perfect spot. Inside the wheel of an aquatic plant mowing boat. The beavers haul themselves onto land, plodding along past unknowing humans in search of untouched branches and bark. When dawn breaks, the nocturnal beavers return home. Like all good bedtime routines, there are things to be done before it is time to sleep. Grooming is a necessity, of course. But as a beaver has such little limbs and such a round body, the beavers help each other, cleaning those hard-to-reach spots. The delights of summer are worth waiting the whole year for. And at last, it is back again. The riverbanks are packed as people soak up the sun and refresh themselves in the sparkling water. These warm, long days and those luscious green leaves entice the beaver family out in the evenings. They enjoy summer picnics every day. Feasting on bark and branches, munching on leaves and roots, And what do you do when that perfect bit of bark is just out of reach? The mother beaver shows how it's done. Seeing a beaver family like this would have been an impossible sight only 50 years ago, as Austria's beavers were hunted to extinction by 1838. But the beaver is our living example that it is not too late, that we can still bring species back from the brink of extinction. Due to successful reintroduction since the 1970s, Austria is now home to around 9,000 beavers. And in Vienna, humans share the city with over 230 of them. Showing us that if we can make space for nature in our urban worlds, it becomes a home where both humans and wildlife can thrive.
The Rocky Mountain Heart Ranges rise out of the boreal forests of the British Columbia interior. At the headwaters of the Peace River, these mountains and forests have been home to First Nations people for uncountable generations. The plants and animals that we share these lands with are part of an extended family that care for one another.
We're actually in a very special spot right now. That's why it feels so good here. We're standing right below these sacred Twin Sister Mountains right behind me, a very sacred site for our people. It's not only for the Saulteaux, but the Cree, the Danizaa, and a lot of other tribes that have told about these sacred mountains also. For the Saulteaux people in the 1800s, when they got here, through prayer and ceremony, they asked for guidance. These Twin Sister Mountains were given to them in their prophecy to find a safe place to come and live forever with protection. Our people were not being chased anymore.
Fleeing colonial oppressors and starvation, the Saulteaux arrived here and were invited to stay by the Moberly Lake Danezaa. The caribou of these mountains fed both of our nations and continue to inspire us.
There was a time in the past where they were a primary source of food. They're gentle, communal creatures that live together in an amazing way. I just think they're like an exemplary species on this planet of how we should all be trying to exist.
Yeah, we're all animals, and caribou we're just like them. We're in their territory, right? So to share it with them and to help them thrive is pretty special.
69% of Northeast BC is within half a kilometer of a human-caused disturbance. The seismic lines, roads, pipelines, mines, wind farms, forestry activities have really, the cumulative impacts of those have pushed a lot of wide-ranging species to the brink, and caribou being one of them.
With mountain caribou populations disappearing from across their range, our roles have reversed. Where once the caribou sustained us, now it is we, the people, that must provide sanctuary for the caribou. We have been working to recover this animal since the 1970s, when we initiated a hunting moratorium because their numbers had fallen so low.
Conservation historically has been a colonial endeavor. It's been about working to preserve areas of wilderness that has tended to erase people and the histories of Indigenous peoples specifically from the landscape. Indigenous-led conservation is critical. It's the future. And here in the piece, that has been just abundantly clear with the heroic efforts to save caribou in the mountains here.
In 2020, the Saulteaux and West Moberly First Nations signed a historic agreement with Canada and British Columbia to protect the caribou in our traditional territory. This agreement commits the colonial governments to partner with us on efforts to restore caribou and maintain our established treaty rights. The agreement permanently sets aside 2 million acres of land, including the Twin Sisters, for conservation. It requires caribou be considered in land use management plans across all of this area. With industrial development widespread across our territory, these protections are not coming a moment too soon.
Today is an example that, we can achieve reconciliation.
Caribou have been a part of our way of life since time immemorial. The Danyuzak people of northeastern BC walk the same trails as the caribou, and we are interconnected with them. They're a part of our lives. They always have been, and to watch what was happening to them hurt.
While mountain caribou continue to decline everywhere else across Western Canada, even before the signing of this agreement, we have managed to reverse this decline in the Klintsay-Za herd. But we have a long way to go. In order for us to hunt caribou once again, this herd, which was down to only 16 animals, will once again have to number in the hundreds, as our elders tell us they once did. This agreement is a major step towards making this a reality. Each spring and summer, our guardians look after caribou cows and their calves that we protect during the calving season in a maternity pen.
There's always someone here, there's always bodies up here watching the girls. We feed twice a day, we do predator patrols, we monitor the fences to make sure the voltage is high so predators aren't coming in, and we just watch their behavior if anything odd comes up. We just live here together, and it's just a pretty amazing opportunity.
Since 2008, in collaboration with many partners, we have helped the Klintsay-Za herd grow from just 16 animals to over 100 today.
That's what's gonna always stay with me, is just their faces. Looking at me and waiting for that feed and just being curious and just seeing their vulnerability, and knowing that I'm part of that.
Even with all these efforts, neither caribou or our cultural connection to the land will survive unless we address many other related issues. Our work with caribou is part of our larger work to restore this land and our way of life on it. The Twin Sisters Native Plants Nursery is jointly owned by our 2 First Nations as part of this effort.
So what we do is we go out into the area that's going to be developed. We collect all the native plants, seeds in the area. We dry them, store them. We get them ready to plant so that when the project is ready to be put back, it's put back as it was found. It's so inspiring to see our own people working and taking an interest in, restoring our land.
In 2019, Saulteaux First Nation started ASCII Reclamation to ensure that the restoration of industrial impacted areas is in alignment with our cultural relationship to the land.
Ski is the Cree word for earth, and so earth reclamation is what we're focused on. The ethnobotany list was identified through land use studies with the Lands Department on plants that were culturally significant to the nation. By going out and planting plants that are culturally significant to the nation, we're able to meet things such as wildlife forage, which is a value of treaty rights, being able to do any sort of herbal medicine, and we're able to go in and start to create these designs that we can look at using the site again in maybe 5 to 10 years down the road from now.
I think that what we really need is right in front of us all the time if we just know how to see it. And all the food that we need to exist is right around us in our environment. And we exist together in what we call like sacred relationships. For the moose to thrive, for the caribou to thrive, we need to continue to honor them in our prayers and in our ceremonies, and eating them is a part of that. There's no time when you express a deeper gratitude to an animal than when it offers itself to you and you bring it home and you share it with people you love in the community. And you know, I hope that in my lifetime we could have the chance to do that with the caribou again, you know, and to honor them in that way and to bring them into our community in ceremony and to feast together.
There is a young man here, a baby. Is Naomi in the room? Naomi. Her son, Spencer. This agreement is for him. Maybe, if we do everything right, he'll be able to harvest the caribou and utilize the caribou the way we have traditionally through the years.
It's almost prophetic in a way, because these four-leggeds are being saved on these very sacred mountains that saved our people. And it's only one species that we're helping, but I think it's just the beginning. There's other animals that are in trouble. There's a lot of interconnectedness with saving our species and helping them to survive. It's for the future generations, and we're doing this because that's what we have to do.
Going in first thing when you just launch off and suddenly you're weightless. And then the next touch of me is anticipation of what I may or may not see. Each day is different with the visibility and the temperature and the tide, but it's always a bit exciting. I was born in Western Australia just before World War II, and we got very close to the water from a very early age. Everyone could swim to begin with. I mean, you got taught to swim by being taken out in the South Fremantle jetty and just dropped off the end. That was absolutely standard procedure. And you learn to see and think underwater. I went out on a long reef once and an octopus came out and he saw me and I saw him and I sort of waved a bit and he looked at me again, said, you know, something going on. Came out with me all the way on the reef, probably 30 metres, 20 metres, and then let me go into the deep waters. And when I came back, he was waiting for me. We came in together and I did that for about 2 weeks. And so that sort of thing gives you an early heads up on those sort of things. But at 17 I went into the Air Force and that took me out of the opportunity to get near the water or any environmental stuff. When you're flying around in bombers, you're not really thinking about the environment very much. And it was only when we went down to Dramana to live for a while and I went down and started doing a few things, putting my head under, thinking about it because I was older and had a bit more time on my hands. And that enabled me to join a group like Marine Care Ricketts Point in its early days. And I was ultimately president of that and built it up to a couple of hundred people and a lot of activity. It was quite dismaying after diving and swimming at Portsea and places like that and all around there with quality clear water to come up here and see what was up near the city. Very early on, Ricketts Point was awful. Fortunately, the declaration of the sanctuary started to make a big difference. There was a slow recovery and after 7 years, you wouldn't have been aware that it was so bad as it had been. So I saw all that happening and that was lovely to see. And then the fish started coming back. And a classic example would be the morwong. They used to be about 30 centimetres long and nose down, very frightened. They'd move very, very quickly. People speared them all the time because it's so easy to get into Ricketts Point. And today, when the sanctuary's fully recovered, the dusky morwong are now about 60 centimetres long, 4 times the mass, and they're relaxed. They'll be sitting down like that, eating, and you come past and they'll look at you and just ignore you and keep on eating. You know, so that's a dramatic marker for me of just how much it has changed. And it's quite vital today. It's full of life and full of fish of all kinds. I kind of like the banjo sharks. They look like a big stingray, but they're not. They haven't got a sting. And the big mother there was there one day and she was pregnant. And I thought, oh good, I'll go down and pat a baby bump because it's like a football. And so I sort of did a negative descent, moved toward her very gently and then started patting her wing a bit so she wouldn't be scared because I didn't want to disturb her. And then I patted a baby bump and that was really nice. And then I felt it's a bit intrusive, like patting a woman's belly that you don't know is pregnant, you know. So I then started backing away and I backed away about 6 metres and she rose up and came up and swam up onto my chest and just stayed there. It had to do with my body warmth, I'm not, you know, but for her to trust me enough to come up and do that, that was really nice and touching. And I've had lots of odd things like that happen, so that they're quite moving and they stop you feeling in any way that they're something you can fish and eat. I still eat fish and chips, but I have a bit of trouble doing it. When people get involved in that sort of environment without the human complications of problem children or problem grandparents or problem husbands or wives or problems with their job or their body, all that sort of stuff, that's gone. It washes away. The wind blows through one ear and out the other, and they become involved in just nature at its best. It's a real blessing to have that within walking distance of virtually everybody in Melbourne. Well, not quite walking distance, but certainly a couple of k's in the car. You've got to really protect it and look after it.
people brought the foxes over at least 8,000, if not more, years ago. As long as we have been on those islands, the fox has been with us. Santa Cruz is 24 miles long, 6 miles wide. But when you're on foot, it's a pretty big place to be. Some of our oldest remains that have been scientifically dated go to 14,000 years. So when we say this is our homeland, we really mean it. There's actually 2 creation stories, but one of them has us coming from Limu, being brought up out of the earth there. That sense of knowing, being on those islands for so many of those 1,000 years, they really understood their world there, made it paradise. Our people were devastated at the time of colonization. We were removed from the islands and for decades never realized our connection to them.
Early European settlers on the island also altered the fragile ecosystem in fundamental ways. By the 19th century, they had established vast sheep and cattle ranches on Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel Islands. And the unique little Channel Island fox, apex predator of the islands for thousands of years, was a casualty.
Island ecosystems are very special places. They tend to be much more fragile than mainland ecosystems. The number of species we have on the island is much fewer than the mainland, and those species have evolved differently to suit to their new environment. Little changes in island ecosystems can have big impacts. There are a number of native, rare, and endemic species on this island, one being the fox, descended from the mainland gray fox, which is about 10 to 12 pounds. When the foxes got out to this island, we think they shrunk. They went down to only 4 pounds, smaller than your average house cat by a great margin. Likely that was a combination of unique island factors. Perhaps there just wasn't the same kind of food base available to them out here, so they had to shrink their body size in order to be sustainable here on this island. Another example is the island scrub jay. It is the only insular endemic bird species in North America, and it only exists on Santa Cruz Island, and that bird species actually got bigger, and it got bluer. So it's bluer and about 30% bigger than the mainland scrub jay. So islands do funny things to species, which makes them special places and makes the species on the island important to learn more about. Island foxes are pretty special creatures. They only exist on the California islands. They have a very unique personality because they don't spend a lot of time with people, tend to be very curious about what we're doing, but they also have their foxy little lives that they have to get on with.
The most recent data suggests that Channel Island foxes have only been on the Channel Islands for maybe the last 6,000 years. So it's likely that Native Americans took them across with them.
We do see ritualistic burials that we have found where the Chumash obviously cared a lot about these animals, and about 3,000 years ago transported them down to the southern islands.
The fox was treated as a relative. It was a companion. It's highly prized as a spirit animal as well. They were buried with people, with abalone shells, tube whistles. They're buried with children. They were just really honored, and they were sacred animals, and they still are today. They are clever, they're smart. We're warned even today, don't leave your stuff out. They know how to do stuff. They'll open the zippers, they'll steal your shoes. We're walking around, we see one sock somewhere. They like to take things.
Santa Cruz Island was home to the Santa Cruz Island Company, and that was a ranching company that would ranch mostly cattle, some sheep, and at some point pigs were also introduced to the island. Having them on the island wasn't sustainable. The vegetation in many places was reduced to bare earth due to grazing by feral sheep. When the Nature Conservancy started looking into restoration on this island, one of the first things we needed to do was remove the huge threat to the island ecosystem as a whole. So we spent about 5 years in the 80s taking feral sheep off the island. And we thought things were looking up, the vegetation started coming back, we thought we did a great job, And then in the late 90s, we started noticing fewer and fewer foxes.
In 2004, the service listed 4 of the 6 subspecies of Channel Island foxes as endangered under the endangered species list.
So where we thought previously there might have been 1,500 or 2,000 foxes on the island, we were seeing so many carcasses and really not very many foxes around during the day. The only way to make sure that they would survive until we could do something to remove the threat was to pull those foxes into captivity and learn how to captive breed them.
The decline in the Channel Island foxes was because of predation by golden eagles. And the reason that the golden eagles were on the islands is because those niches, which normally would be filled by the native bald eagles, were empty. The bald eagles had been poisoned by DDT, so there were no bald eagles on the island. When the bald eagles are there, they mostly eat fish and other small birds, and so they don't really eat things like foxes. Golden eagles, on the other hand, are more generalists, so they were subsidized by the feral piglets on the island, and there they were, Channel Island foxes, delicious for golden eagles. We had a problem. We had an ecosystem that was out of balance. You throw one thing off and other things get thrown off, and definitely part of that cascade effect was that we were about to lose Channel Island foxes. That really happened because of human impacts to the islands and the introduction of non-native species.
Feral pigs had been introduced to the island in the 1850s, and were pretty well dominating the system to ensure that we weren't just removing the golden eagles that had nested on the island, but we also removed the draw to the island, which is the feral pigs.
I started going out there in the late 80s, and I've seen the transition of, especially on Santa Cruz, of the removal of the sheep, the pigs, the golden eagles, and I've seen the resurrection of the native plants. By removing the pigs, Fox really did save our archaeological sites in that whole process. And that's hard to do because the entire island is full of our remnants of our lifeways out there.
There's this one pair of golden eagles that was quite smart, had seen many of their compatriots trapped and pulled off the island, and it took us 2 years to get them, but we finally got them. When we went into that one nest to remove the chick and fledge it out in Northern California, there were a lot of fox collars in there, a lot of radio collars, a lot of fox bones. I think we pulled out, over a dozen collars and over 24 individuals. So even just having this one pair with a chick nesting on the island was still impacting the fox population.
The non-native species were removed, and so once the feral pigs and the golden eagles were removed from the island, that removed the threat to island foxes.
We were able to start releasing the captive individuals into the wild, and yes, fortunately we saw a pretty quick turnaround. The foxes knew what to do when they got out into the wild. In 2006, I started working as a fox biologist on Santa Cruz Island. Figured out somewhere along college that field biology could be a career, which I never thought could be the case, that people would actually pay you to tromp around in the woods and research animals. So when I started, we think that there was about 100 individuals on Santa Cruz Island, and 20 of those were in captivity. I was also thrust into a role where very quickly I was the only person on the Fox Project and figured out how special these animals are. There was one individual in Laguna Canyon, the canyon where the golden eagles lived, and she was a survivor. There really wasn't any other foxes in that canyon at the time. We started noticing her kind of limping around and looking a little woozy. Put out a trap, captured her, and she was just covered in parasites. We think she was just very, very unhealthy. So we took her in, gave her some flea medication, kind of let her feel better, put her back out into that canyon with a collar on, and then I spent the next 10 years tracking her. She was our oldest fox that we ever had on collar, and she lived to be 10 years old and died peacefully under a bush, and I got to spend 10 years watching her grow up. Santa Cruz Island was really in a crisis mode when we started working on the island in the 80s. We uncovered challenge after challenge, but with our partners, found a way to pull off a pretty tremendous restoration effort.
the low of the population declines, we were looking at like 15 island foxes on a couple of the islands, and Santa Cruz, the bigger island, had around 50. This is a species on the brink of extinction. It's extraordinary that we were able to bring them back from that brink of extinction.
And where it went from a moonscape out there, where nothing was growing. After the removal of those animals, we were seeing pine forests. Now they're taller than me. It's been over 20 years that all has happened. So we've seen this coming back.
The island fox is a perfect example of what can go right for an endangered species. It had all the right pieces: identifiable threat, partners that were willing to help, scientists that were engaged. Those are the pieces that you need to get something recovered and off the endangered species list.
When I look at this island, of course, I see the vegetation that's come back. I see the foxes that are all over the place. But I also hope that people are looking to us to understand that conservation done right will produce fantastic results for ourselves and also for future generations.
Knowing that the main threat to their continued existence was golden eagle predation, this gave us something to focus on. One specific thing that if we could fix that problem, then maybe we could bring the foxes back from the brink of extinction. It gets really challenging with species that have many threats, more than one threat, or if it's habitat loss, where it's something that's difficult to reverse. So it was very fortunate in the case of island foxes, where it was something that we could work on, we could pinpoint, put a lot of energy into that one thing, and not to say it was easy. I mean, removing 5,000 feral pigs from an island off the coast of California is not easy. Bringing foxes into captivity for captive breeding is not easy, but it's something that you are pretty sure is gonna work because you know what the problem is. Island fox was the fastest recovered mammal that's ever been listed on the endangered species list. It was about 12 years between when it was listed and when we were able to take it off the list. Human impacts are often what drives a species towards extinction. But it's human efforts that can reverse those population declines and cause a species to become recovered. And that's the land managers, the biologists, other scientists, and the general public. Everyone working together, working towards a common goal. That's how we're going to reverse extinction.
It is only just before sunrise that there is respite from the heat. And the birds leave the safety of the forest to quench their thirst at the waterhole. But the magpies hesitate. They are wary. In their minds, scenes of danger are playing out. Raptors are the essence of fear. But over generations, these brave magpies have learned to know their enemies well. Today, however, there is a different mark on the wet mat. After generations of absence, a silent shadow has returned to these forests. One that the magpies are learning to fear again. The Iberian lynx. Brought to the brink of extinction by human persecution, lynxes are making a slow comeback. This young female is over a year old. At this age, she should have been expelled to search for her own territory. But she is lucky. Her mother, called Odrina, who rules this forest, still allows her to make use of the waterhole. It is only a matter of minutes before the heat returns to the plains. And the sun beats down, unforgiving. But as it nears the western mountains, clouds begin to gather above. And the magpies sense that their new, biggest fear is on the move. Odrina, the undisputed owner of the territory. She isn't alone. Following close behind are her 3 female kittens. Odrina leads them, focused and determined, to the water's edge. The magpies can relax. Odrina won't be ambushing them today. But they have got someone else's attention. The young cub may be only 4 months old, but she already has the stealth of a true lynx. Or almost. Thanks to unprecedented conservation efforts, the Iberian lynx is back from the brink. And with successful mothers like Odrina, the complex ecosystem of the Central Plains is slowly reforming again. As the ancient battle of wits resumes between magpies and lynxes.
I started hunting for a lot of different reasons. One is I like the idea of harvesting your own meat. It's great to be out on the landscape, and I think it's a really great experience to actually understand the whole process of where your food comes from. My name's Cody Wallace. I'm working on a master's right now in wildlife biology. That I wanted to find a place where I could make a real impact. Really come to love pronghorn and how much there is to learn about them. Hunting is definitely one of the most important management tools for conservation of wildlife.
The wildlife belongs to the people. We manage wildlife in the public trust for the state of Wyoming. My name is Lee Knox. I'm a wildlife biologist for the Wyoming Game and Fish out of Laramie. I think it's a success story when you're able to allow hunting opportunities because it means that you have a robust population. The opportunity to go fill your freezer with game meat. It really is just a part of Wyoming. There's a lot of renewed interest in wind energy in Shirley Basin. And so because several of them are being built in crucial winter range, part of the discussion was to look at the impacts on pronghorn. The collaboration with universities is just a great way to make sure large-scale projects like this occur. It's impossible without working with university.
I'm studying how pronghorn learn to migrate. The first part of my research is trying to understand if pronghorn are using memory to recreate their migration each year. How do they acquire that knowledge? To get at that, we're looking at doe-fawn pairs, so mother and then its offspring. We're following them over the course of 2 years, and what that'll be able to tell us is, does that fawn do something similar in its second year of life when it's on its own to what it did in its first year of life with its mom? There's another one over there. We typically try to capture fawns immediately after birth. They get really fast, really quick, so you've kind of got like a 4-day window after they're born where you can capture them by hand. So first thing we do is weigh it. If they're under 3.1 kilograms, we have to put a different type of collar on them. 5.4 with the bag. Then we put a collar on it. We take a hair sample. We'll do a few morphological measurements. Take a couple pictures and then let it go.
Medicine Bow Pronghorn Herd Unit is what we're looking at, which is Shirley Basin. It's bigger than Shirley Basin. It's one of the largest pronghorn herds in the world. The only other herd that could, even compare is Sublette and Pinedale. And Wyoming has significantly more pronghorn than any other state in the U.S., and the U.S. has the majority of the pronghorn in North America. So this herd is pretty critical to the overall population of pronghorn in North America. So it's really critical to understand how our energy needs are going to affect this population.
Today's October 1st, and we came out to check on this mortality and found this doe. Looks like she got caught up in this fence. There's a lot of different challenges that pronghorn face in the Shirley Basin, roads and habitat degradation and just all sorts of different stuff, and fences is another obstacle that, can negatively influence their movement and, in cases like this, actually be the direct cause of mortality.
Pronghorn need fluidity on the landscape. They migrate, but they're also just nomadic. They don't carry a lot of body fat on them. They move, and when you see them from the air, especially in the winter, they run like schools of fish in how they move on the landscape and stay tight together. And if it snows, they move. If it gets dry, they need to move. Inability to move, I think, is a large factor in declining populations throughout the West. Pronghorn just aren't as well adapted at maneuvering through fences and roadways. Private landowners are critical to population management. There's really good landowners in this area that still really care about the habitat and what's going on.
Conservation is at the center of the work we do at Pathfinder Ranches. We can manage with conservation in mind because conservation not only provides the end result of financial benefit, but also ecological benefit. And we know a ranch with hunting, with fishing, with resources of abundant wildlife, whether you're into bird watching or whatever feature, if we have a good ecosystem through the conservation work we do, that provides a base value for us. Pathfinder Ranches, we've done a number of things to specifically benefit pronghorn antelope. We built wildlife migration gates. We have 437 miles of fence. What we try to do is enhance those and make sure every pasture has an entrance, has an exit for pronghorn specifically. I picture myself, 70-year-old man, driving my truck, coming back to see how we helped kickstart nature back into its natural procession. And that takes time, but more than time, it takes that initial action to start, and that's to me what conservation is.
Everything has an impact, it's just you gotta ask yourself how much and is it worth it? The park where your kids play soccer used to be habitat, your house used to be habitat. You've pretty much well dispersed the wildlife from where you now exist. We're lucky in Wyoming, I don't know how many generations it'll last, but we don't have a whole lot of people. And because we have such a small population that you can't help but be connected to the environment and wildlife.
As we're seeing globally, migrations decline, understanding how these migrations are maintained throughout generations is really important, because if animals have to learn their migration pattern from their mom, it could place a higher conservation value on preserving migrations that we already have. To relearn a migration could be really difficult if there's no animals left in that population that have that knowledge.